Welcome everyone, my name is Ryan from AFL Access and today we are reacting to round 9 of the AFL home and away season. Quite a few interesting things happened over the weekend and we're going to have a look at some of them. So just quickly, before we actually get into the video, there are a couple of things that I want to mention to you. Firstly, sorry for the picture and sound quality of the video. It's a bit subpar to what I would normally be welcome of. Unfortunately, when I tried to record this, my camera battery was flat and I didn't know about it. So I'm using my webcam, which is a bit different. And I'm also using the streaming mic setup as opposed to my recording mic setup, which is not as good as well. It's basically me just kind of being lazy, so sorry for that. Yeah, the other two things that I wanted to mention was we do have a Discord server if you want to come over and check that out and be able to react to this stuff as it's happening. Then link will be in the description below. Make sure you come in and say hi and even just help us set it up because it's pretty bare bones at the moment. We want to see you there and talk to you. And lastly, our Twitter will be in the description below as well. We are currently asking for feedback from you with regards to our Footy Rivals show that airs on every Thursday night. Basically, Justin and I are doing certainty tips for the round and for each round. And if we get our certainty tip wrong, then there's going to be some sort of punishment that comes with that. But it's going to be up to you guys to decide what that punishment is. So make sure you go follow us on Twitter and give us some ideas as to what some punishments can be. That would be fantastic. But without further ado, let's head in on the video at hand. Friday night footy, West Coast takes on Melbourne, and it was a pretty enthralling game. Melbourne led for most of the game, actually. The game was pretty hotly contested. It was pretty even across the board. One team would gain some advantage, the other team would gain some advantage, but both teams were playing fairly poorly for a large majority of the night until West Coast in the last quarter sort of came out and went bang! And, you know, some miracle things happened, including this.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
Oh, Ryan! What? Yeah, so that was an almost certain mark of the year, at least contender. That's going to be one for the ages, I think. So West Coast came out on top on that, which was brilliant for me as a West Coast supporter. Melbourne's season is almost written off, and considering they made it to a prelim last year and to be sitting where they are currently on the ladder, it's pretty disappointing. In fact, the game went as their game has gone all year, dominating inside 50s, but just not being able to convert on the scoreboard. The first game of Saturday was actually quite interesting. It was much more close than I had anticipated up until the last quarter, at least anyway. St Kilda were actually more than within like winning distance until Collingwood just turned it on in the last quarter and the Saints just had no answers for them. Collingwood are definitely looking to be the form team of the competition besides for Geelong. I do reckon that these two teams are a clear standout above the rest of the competition, and that includes the Giants. They don't seem to have those lapses in games or just games in general where they're just playing really poorly. And even if they are playing poorly, they're not getting smashed by other teams. They're staying with it and then they just pop up for a quarter and go bang! The next game of the round was Brisbane versus Adelaide. My certainty tip for the week was Brisbane, and thank God they came up by a point because that was really worrying me that I'd have some kind of punishment to do this week. But no, my prediction was right and I'm going to hang my hat on that. Brisbane came up for me, and Brisbane are looking to be a solid team this year. They are definitely looking to be real finalists come the end of the year. It is still only May and they may drop off after the buys, but for all intents and purposes right now, they're looking to be in the top 8 come the end of the year and could potentially, depending on where they finish, shake up the finals. Adelaide were pretty gutsy. They just left their attacking way too late in the game. If they were playing like that from the start of the game, they probably would have won. They probably deserved to win, to be honest, but they didn't come away with the win, and they come up against West Coast next week at Adelaide Oval, which should actually be a really enthralling contest. Geelong versus Bulldogs went pretty much exactly as it was scripted. There were a couple of injury concerns across the game, but for all intents and purposes, the game was more or less a blowout. It was interesting watching up until about halftime, and then after halftime, Geelong just ran away with it, really. Nothing too interesting came out of it besides perhaps Stewart taking a really impressive hanger, to the point where it's probably contested as to whether his hanger was better than Liam Ryan's was on Friday night. And you just couldn't help but smile after he was smiling, being so happy after taking the grab in the first place. You just knew that he was loving being in that moment, and that was really touching to watch. Essendon versus Freo was an interesting match. Low scoring match, which is to be expected from a Ross Lyon coached team. Fremantle is an interesting case this year. They can have games where they're just scoring immensely and they'll break 100 points fairly easily. And then they'll have games where they just bog down and just look crap. But they make the other team look crap as well, so it keeps the scores and the game tightly contested. My only problem is when Freo are playing like that, they can't kick a winning score. They just straight up can't kick a winning score. They only actually look like winning a game when they're kicking and banging goals. They are looking their best, and they're looking at their most lethal when they're freely playing the game. They've actually got the players on the park to be able to play really free-flowing, high-scoring footy, and a really good defense to back them up on the turnover. Please, Ross, just let your players play the game. Stop putting in these super high dense structures and let them play. Open up some space, because your midfield is by far and away good enough to win the contested ball just through Fife alone. Your forward line is by far and away good enough to be able to win most contests, if not halve them. And your back line is one of the best back lines in the competition right now. Please just let them play the game. North Melbourne and Sydney was very interesting. North Melbourne almost came away with a snatched victory, but albeit they were not able to do it down in Blundstone. The Swans actually looked quite impressive in stages, and the Kangaroos were pretty flat, I felt. They really took advantage of when the Swans looked flat, but for the most part, I felt like the Swans actually had the upper hand of the match for most of the game. They just weren't capitalising on their own dominance, and when they weren't playing in dominant patches, it felt like the game was more even, but North Melbourne were actually able to take their chances going forward. Now, that just might be, I don't know, a wrong interpretation of what I was watching at the time, but that's just what I felt like was happening, which is actually pretty good stead for North Melbourne, that they were able to play in such a way without dominating any patches of play, but still able to take their chances and keep their scoring ticking over to the point where they were in the match right up until the last second of the game. So kudos to them, but I do think North are definitely struggling this year. Sydney seem to be coming into some better form at the moment, especially with the loss of Buddy. Every game that they play that Buddy is not in that forward line, they seem to be playing better and better every week. What does this mean for when Buddy does come back? Because he will be coming back into this team. There's no way he's playing in the NEFL. I don't know, and I'm just hoping they keep a lot of the spotlight on Sam Reid as opposed to being too Buddy-centric when he comes back into the team. Port Adelaide and the Suns was a very interesting match. The Suns actually took it up to Port Adelaide much more than what anyone else thought. I actually gave them a small chance in this match, and for about 2 to 3 quarters, they looked like being able to potentially sneak a win out of this, but Port were far too good across the entire game. They played all 4 quarters and they came away with a victory for it. It wasn't really anything too notable that came out of this game other than the fact that the Suns are a much better prospect than a lot of people were giving them credits for at the start of the year. Stuart Dew is doing a really fantastic job with this list. Port Adelaide got the win they needed to get, especially with the injuries that they have to their list, and hopefully they get some of their players back over the next coming weeks. And also a kudos to Dougal Howard for being captain in the game despite being dropped like before the start of the year even happened. So that's a pretty good mental attribute to be able to have, to be able to be dropped in the JLT not be picked up in the first few rounds, wait, injuries happen, you get your chance, and now you're captaining the side because, to be fair, there's no captains in the team right now. But how good would that feel for your self-confidence that you were able to take that mantle on after such a difficult, start of the year? That's very impressive, and all credit has got to go to the bloke. Good stuff. Next round we come to Justin's certainty. He went with Richmond over Hawthorn, if my memory serves, and he got this one absolutely right. In fact, Hawthorn were pretty dismal for most of the afternoon. They were really good in the first quarter, but they just couldn't convert their scoring shots, which I think actually really hurt their confidence for the rest of the match. If they were able to convert at least 50% of their scoring shots in the first quarter, they would have gone into the first quarter up, which I'm not sure whether they did or not. But their confidence would have been up for the rest of the match, if not at least for the next 2 quarters at the very least. As soon as halftime came around, they kind of just stopped. Bruce came out after halftime, kicked 2 quick goals, which is really good, got them back into the match. But after that, they just looked slow. They looked sluggish, their skills were poor, and it wasn't even a case of Richmond putting pressure onto their kicks. They were very unpressured kicks that they were just missing targets by like 5 to 10 meters, and I'm not talking like a 50 meter kick. These were like 20, 25, 30 meter kicks that these guys were missing by quite a range, and this is just not something that you are used to seeing from Hawthorn. We do have to remember they're a young team, and so some inconsistency will come throughout their game. They were 2 men down for most of the game, so that is something to take into consideration, but they're a young team. So like I said at Footy Rivals on Thursday night, they're going to be coming up and down. They're going to be overconfident at times after good wins like they were against GWS, and that will lead to them not just doing the fundamental basic things throughout the course of a game. They'll try and do too many specky kicks, and it's just not going to work out. So this brings them back down a peg a little bit, but it brings them back to where I think they should be and where they probably are in terms of the competition standings. But I think they'll be better for it, and they will improve as the year goes on. As for Richmond, they're ticking some wins over pretty nicely. They're still not looking particularly great a lot of the time that they're winning the game, but I suppose they're much like the Eagles at the moment, where they're not particularly playing great footy, but they're churning over wins. And that's pretty much all that matters at this point in the season. After the bye is when you can start really tinkering the game plans and making sure that you're coming into the run of finals with tip-top shape and tip-top form and tip-top structures, and your team is settled as to what it wants to do. So Richmond, just keep plugging on, and I'm sure you will be there at the pointy end of the year. And finally, we round out the round with possibly one of the greatest and one of the worst games we're probably going to have all year. GWS completely demolished Carlton right from the get-go on Sunday. It should be noted, Carlton started with the first goal. Hooray! But that was pretty much all she wrote. I'm really happy that Carlton decided to not take my advice and put Ed Curnow on Lachie Whitfield, because it meant that Lachie Whitfield came back into my dream team and scored 190 points, which was higher than his break even. So even though I carried him over the last 2 weeks, he still earned me money. I really don't know what Carlton's logic was coming into this game. I did say on Thursday that I thought after such a hard contested game against Collingwood, where they took it right up to the Pies and just fell short, that this game would be, particularly the loss, would be very emotionally taxing, and this game would probably be a blowout. And it was exactly what I said it was going to be. I knew Carlton would come out and they would just be deflated, like really deflated after that loss last week. And they would come out and do and be exactly what they were this week. I would expect next week to be different. They'll be back to their competitive selves. We've seen this trend now twice, where Carlton will be super, super competitive and be super, super close to winning a game of football, and then not get over the line, and then the following week they get absolutely belted and then the following week they come out and they're really, really super close, and they're really trying, but they don't quite get over the line, and then the following week it's just, you know, they're belted. This is what happens with a young team, specifically when they're not getting the results in games that they probably should be getting. And it's not to take away anything from GWS. GWS took them to the cleaners after being cleaned up themselves the prior week. But I think this game says a lot more about Carlton than it does GWS. I don't think GWS are competing with Collingwood and Geelong, at least not this stage of the season. Things can change. There's still very many months to go until finals, and teams' forms can ebb and flow and change. Geelong could just hit a brick wall and just drop completely. We don't know until we see it. It's not all doom and gloom for Carlton. Yes, they've had 2 shocking losses over the last 3 weeks. However, there is very definite signs of improvement within this team. They will get the wins. They just need to keep at it and not try and take the losses so emotionally. Because if they take that emotion out of the loss, you'll find that they'll be able to back up weeks more consistently than what they currently are. So keep plugging away. You'll get there. I'm going to finish with this. I finished with this last week, and I really don't want to be finishing with this week on week, but it really seems that every single week there is a very controversial umpiring decisions that are happening every week, and it's the narrative is becoming very boring. It's becoming very stale. I'm quite sick to death of consistently listening about how the umpires are performing week on, week out. I don't think the complaint of umpiring has ever been as bad as what it has this year. Now, it might be recency bias that is affecting that particular comment from me. You know, every year, if you go into the online forums and stuff like that, a lot of people are complaining about umpiring and so on and so forth, but I've never seen such vitriol towards umpires as what I have this year. There'll always be hate against the umpires. There always will be. Yeah, there's nothing that you can do about that, specifically when you're in a losing team and you think, oh, that umpire cost me a goal and cost us the game. It's not really what happens, but that's what people think happens. And people who spout free kick counts absolutely know nothing about football if that's what their argument is. I just wish there was a bit less ambiguity in our rules that would have the umpires in such positions to be able to have fans throw as much abuse at them as they do. It's not really fair for the umpires. It's not fair that the AFL has created this scenario where the umpires can actually receive this kind of outlandish backlash because the rules are not written in a coherent manner. You'll quite often see that 2 people who are arguing about a rule and how it was interpreted within the space of why was this free kick paid or why was this free kick not paid, and both parties are actually correct. That scenario shouldn't exist. There should be very clear-cut rules. I'm just gonna leave it on this. The AFL should be doing better with regards to that. The umpires cop enough flack as it is, and they're copping even more now because the AFL just can't do their jobs right. It is what it is. Anyway, guys, I'm going to leave you with that. That is my reaction to round 9. Overall, it's a pretty good round. A lot of close games, a lot of interesting games. Couple of games that were very close up until 3/4 time, and then the better team just kind of blew it out in the last quarter, which is a bit disappointing. But it meant that for most games, for a large chunk of the game, it was very, very watchable and very engaging, which I don't think has happened in a round of footy for quite a long time. Across as many games as we've had, I think probably 7 out of the 9 games this week were very watchable. We're very close, at least until 3/4 time. So kudos to all of the teams, or at least 14 of the 18 teams that played this weekend. And yeah, I'm just going to leave it with that. Thank you very much for watching. If you haven't done so already and you like the video, make sure you leave a big thumbs up down below. It means a lot to us. And if you haven't done so already, make sure you do subscribe and ring that notification bell to receive notifications when new content comes out. We do a weekly show on a Thursday night called Footy Rivals. We do the React View videos, and I will be trying my absolute best to bring back the power rankings for tomorrow. Just bear with me because it is very high intense with regards to the editing stage of that video, and it takes a lot of time to go through and do. So I'll be trying my best to bring that out, specifically because I haven't done one for about 5 weeks. So everyone's form has changed and everyone's position on the form ladder is going to be different. So if you want to check that out, make sure you ring the bell of notifications for when that comes out. Don't forget, we do have our Discord server link in the description below. Make sure you come check us out and say g'day in the Discord server. We would love to talk to you on a more personal level, more consistently than just being in the comments. And like I said at the start of the video, make sure you give us a follow on Twitter and give us any feedback as to what kind of punishments Justin and I can do if we get any one of our certainty picks wrong in Footy Rivals on Thursday. Thank you very much for watching. This has been your AFL Access.